Hello and welcome. We are going to talk a little bit about Charlotte Wood's The Self and Its Problems, the Blavatsky lecture from 1919. Now, Blavatsky was one of the founders of Theosophy. And Theosophy is, well, as Leadbeater puts it Theosophy does not treat religion as a matter of faith, but as subjects of study. Study means exploration. He also tells us that Theosophy is not a religion, but an explanation of religion, why we believe what we believe, and that there is no contradiction, and what is found to be unreasonable is rejected, which, is something that Spinoza argues about. He puts religion in its own class, separate from reasoning and such. But then again, being the creatures that we are, things have to make sense. Even if our beliefs don't necessarily include facts, everything still must follow some form of logic. So, with that, let's look at Charlotte Wood's problems with the self. And she writes that when considering the age old idea of the point within the circle, which is assumed to send lines in opposite directions, forming a diameter, in other words, taking the whole and splitting it in half, we have on the one hand that the line is a unity moving between extremes, meaning the line itself, point, circumference, and that the line itself connects the extremes. And on the other hand, that the extremes or poles of its being are of one nature with itself, meaning that, okay, we have these opposites here, these so-called opposites here, but they are part of the whole. And that is something that we tend to neglect in our spiritual philosophy. Typically, the idea is that we have God on the one hand or on one point of the circle and the devil on the other point of the circle, and that they are separate beings. However, according to theosophic teachings, not only theosophic teachings, but also Gnostic teachings and others as well, it goes with what is taught in one of the Old Testament writings, is that God is the author of good and evil, which makes them being opposites, but still part of the whole, God being the whole, or the monad being the whole. And that the line is a unity moving between the extremes. And that the extremes or poles of its being are of one nature with itself. So before continuing, we must point out that the diameter is not only unity, but it is also separation. Again, matter of perspective. This is all going to be a matter of perspective. All of experience, all of life is a matter of perspective. We experience life through our perspectives, and our perspectives continually change. So the idea is that the diameter, not only unity, but is also separation, and that the extremes are perceptions, not actuations, meaning that if you have God and the devil here, they are extremes not separate entities. They are extremes of the whole, and that they are of one nature with the circle or being. One nature, one whole that can be either good or evil. Keep this in mind. And she continues with, since things which are equal to the same thing are equal to one another, sounds like a little bit of geometry. Since things which are equal to the same thing are equal to one another, the ends, though a pair of opposites, are at the same time a pair of identities. They are not two entities different in kind from each other and from the reality moving between them. They are the reality. Again, this whole idea of God and the devil, they are not separate entities. Opposites are merely identifications of the whole. Good is merely an identification of everything that is happening. Bad is merely an identification of one particular event out of a series of events or out of many events. Think of it like this. If the circle is you may have these different selves, authentic self, Christ self, higher self, lower self. You may have those, but they are not separate within you. They are descriptions of modalities, descriptions of ideas. Because a person can be both. Opposites are merely identifications of the whole, not separate beings, because a person can be both kind and oppressive at different times, and even at the same time. Favoritism. Parents tend to have favoritisms. Bosses tend to have favorites, and they treat the favorites different from all of the rest. Therefore, they can be good and oppressive at the same time. This is just an example. The question becomes, does one make a person virtuous or evil? A person who is seen to do continuous good can at the same time be evil because they're being good towards one particular demographic while being evil to another or ignoring another. Focus here, ignore all of this. Focus here, ignore all of that. But does the person become good or evil because their focus is over here and not over there? No, they do not. It is, again, a matter of perspective. And perspective is an important thing when you move through life, because we're taught that there are universal truths, but there are no universal truths. There may be universal perceptions, but the interpretation of the perception is different. And to be honest, I don't even think there are universal perceptions. There are merely those ideas assumed to be universal. And they are assumed to be universal because this person's perspective and this person's perspective and this person's perspective and your perspective and my perspective are all similar along the same lines regarding a particular thought. Therefore, we call it universal, but that's not the case because everyone has their own perception. And each perception and interpretation is going to vary from all of the others. There may be similarities, but they are still individual perceptions. So, again, does one make a person virtuous or evil? No, they do not. The two actions, kindness and oppressiveness, are contained within the person, meaning that you can be good at times, can be oppressive at times, but you contain both of them, and they are part of you, part of the whole. So the two actions, kindness and oppressiveness, are contained within the person, who may choose to exhibit one or the other or both. And we provided examples of each of those. Therefore, they are part of the reality of the individual. We talked of this. Your perception is your perception, which is separate from my perception, which is separate from someone else's perception. Those are your perceptions. They are part of the reality of the individual. Nothing more, nothing less. So reality, all that is contained in reality, is based on your chosen perception. That is why there is never a true consensus. There is a general agreement, a general consensus. As long as there is one who says no, who does not subscribe to a particular belief, who does not subscribe to a particular idea, there will never be true consensus. There will never be a universal truth. There will never be a universal evil. There will be nothing universal, only to that particular person. Continuing, whatever else opposites may be, they are the determining factors in the world process, the two poles within which all forms of manifestation take place. Now, opposites play a larger role than this. Opposites set the boundaries or the limitations that are tolerable. We have laws within our country. We have rules within those we engage with, depending upon the given environment, whether that environment is within a church, is within a courtroom, is out on the street. There are boundaries, acceptable boundaries, ideas that we agree with. So opposites set the limitations that are tolerable. Otherwise, they fold in upon themselves, forming a coil, meaning that if there were no boundaries, or if there were no limitations, okay, then meaning would be lost. Because as these limitations fold in on themselves, or essentially they become canceled out, where there are no laws, there are no acceptable social etiquettes, there are, well, one way of putting it would be there would be chaos. We need these opposites in order to identify, to evaluate events, situations. And that is their role. And because they tend to form cycles, nothing is ever truly resolved. Nothing is ever completely resolved. You experience the same event over and over again in different variations because it runs like a coil. It happens here, it moves along, and then it comes up here. And the only reason the coil works as a demonstration is because the coil could represent age, could represent progress. You experience something here as you move along, you experience it again over here as you move along. It's a continual process. All of nature is founded upon cycles. You don't believe me? Just look outside. You have fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer. Those are cycles. You have day, night, day, night. Again, cycles. You have warm weather, you have cold weather, you have rainy weather, you have clear weather, all cycles. All of nature is based upon a cycle. Everything that we experience is through cycles. And it is our awareness of the cycle, our recognition of a pattern that allows us to move through the cycle much quicker. And the thing about opposites is that they cannot exist if there is a whole. Meaning that because they are the whole, the part of the whole, they are not truly opposites. They are only complementaries, or they are only facets of the whole. They're not truly opposites, merely facets of the whole, because opposites merely define the sense of duality. Again, back to good and evil. These are dualities. They represent opposite poles of the same behavior. So opposites define the sense of duality, which forms a convenience for examination and demonstration only. That's the whole purpose of opposites. They don't truly exist on their own. They merely demonstrate one point versus another point. They are points of transition from one aspect to another. Good can easily be evil, can easily be good, and they flow back and forth. That is the natural rhythm. So existence is dependent upon movement. And we move through from one extreme to another. We continuously move back and forth, back and forth, just as the waves of the ocean ebb and flow. I may have that backwards, but you get the idea. Water comes in and water comes out. Water brings something in and water takes something out. It's a continuous process. And our experience of life moves us between what we call poles of extremities, but they're still part of who we are. So all that exists can be experienced, is experienced through movement, though not in the manner we are accustomed to. Evolution of thought, mind, body, everything qualifies as movement in the same way as waving your hand. You take classes to improve upon yourself. You learn. And as you learn, you expand your knowledge base, you expand your awareness, you expand your understanding. You're progressing, you are growing. Existence is movement, and you cannot get away from movement, because the more you resist nature, the more nature carries you along. I'm not sure if this makes a whole lot of sense to you. I hope it does, because what it is clarifying, this is part of a clarification of a whole. If there is such a universal truth or anything, that truth would be that everything that exists is part of the whole, and that everything within the whole is part of the whole, meaning that we are all part of each other. We are all connected to each other. When we hurt one, we maybe, perhaps that's not a very good example. When we do harm to another, we are being kind to someone else. This happens simultaneously, different times, but we call them opposites, but they're not really opposites. They're part of the whole, which is perception. These opposites are valuations that we use to determine whether an act is beneficial or detrimental. That's it. So I hope this was useful for you. I want to thank you for stopping by and having a listen or two. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing. You can leave a comment. I try to respond to those. And other than that, enjoy the day, and may your life be ever improving.